Debunking the invulnerability myth. Achilles was never invulnerable. If you believe a dip in the Styx made him a god among men, you are the victim of a literary invention born nearly 1,000 years after Homer. Academy of Ancient Myths. Today, we demolish the myth of Achilles' heel to rediscover the brutal, vulnerable, and deeply human hero of the primary sources. Prepare yourself. The truth is far more fascinating than cinematic fiction.
The Betrayal of Statius. The truth about the heel. The Achilles heel? It didn't exist in ancient Greece. This idea first appears only in 96 AD in the work of the Roman poet Statius. Before him, no one, not Homer, not the great tragedians, knew anything about a fatal heel. In the Iliad, Book 21, Achilles is actually wounded by the arm of Asteropaeus. Real blood, real pain. Homer didn't want a superhero. He wanted a man whose greatness lay in his choice to die, not in the impossibility of doing so. The invisible death. Arctinus and the Aethiopis. If the Iliad doesn't describe Achilles' death, where does the myth of Paris's arrow come from? We must look to the Aethiopis by Arctinus of Miletus. Here, Achilles dies at the Scaean Gates, pierced by an arrow guided by Apollo. But pay attention. There is no mention of a magical heel. The tragedy isn't where he is hit, but who hits him. The light of reason, Apollo, striking down the force of primordial destruction. Patroclus and the modern taboo. Homer describes the bond between Achilles and Patroclus as an intimacy that transcends modern labels. Many scholars, from Schliemann to Burgess, have tried to categorize it. But looking at Aeschylus in his Myrmidons, the veil falls. Achilles' grief is not for a comrade in arms, but for the half of his own soul. It is this loss, and not a physical weakness, that truly makes him vulnerable. The Synthesis of Pseudo-Apollodorus. Pseudo-Apollodorus offers us the bridge between Greek and Roman myth. Thetis attempting to make her son immortal by anointing him with ambrosia and tempering him in fire. A failed ritual that leaves a burnt heel, a symbol of what remains human within us. Achilles is the eternal paradox. Immortal glory, paid for with a short and vulnerable life. Conclusion. Every era has reshaped Achilles according to its own needs. We chose to make him invulnerable so we wouldn't have to face his humanity. If this dive into the primary sources has shown you a different hero, subscribe to the Academy and join our search for historical rigor. I'll see you in the comments. Do you prefer Statius's invincible demigod or Homer's vulnerable man?
But if Achilles was never invulnerable, if his was not a tragedy of fate, but a conscious choice, then we must ask, why did the greatest warrior in history actively choose to walk towards an arrow he knew would be fatal? The answer is not in his heel, but in his soul. And here, the myth becomes darker, more human, more terrifying. Are you ready to uncover the truth that poets tried to conceal? The dilemma of two fates. Kleos versus Nostos, the pact with destiny itself. Before Paris's arrow ever flew, Achilles had already sealed his own fate.
But was this an act of heroism or a desperate bargain with destiny itself? Long before Paris's arrow reached him, Achilles had already made his choice. His mother, the goddess Thetis, had revealed a cruel crossroads, a long and peaceful life, but destined for oblivion once he returned home to Phthia, the Nostos, or a glorious and early death beneath the walls of Troy, which would guarantee him eternal fame, a Kleos of Phaeton, imperishable glory. But pay close attention. This was not a passive prophecy, but an offer, a pact with destiny. Achilles, the hero par excellence, could only choose glory, even at the cost of his life. But what happens when glory is no longer enough? And what if this seemingly heroic choice concealed a far darker desire? Initially, it was just a distant shadow, but it was about to become a burning reality. Patroclus, the broken anchor and psychic transformation, the price of vulnerability. What if Achilles' greatest love wasn't just a bond, but the very anchor that kept him from a self-destructive abyss? And what happened when that anchor shattered? The true point of no return, the catalyst for his final choice, was not an arrow or a spell, but the death of Patroclus. Until that moment, Achilles had wavered. He had withdrawn from battle. He had even contemplated returning home. But Patroclus was not just a comrade in arms. He was, as Aeschylus suggests, half of his own soul. His loss was not just pain. It was the severing of the only bond that kept Achilles anchored to life, to his humanity. Imagine the scene. The greatest warrior in the world, reduced to a heap of ashes and tears. Achilles' grief, described in Book XVIII of the Iliad, is a psychic transformation. He covers himself with ashes, refuses food and sleep, becoming a liminal figure, already dead among the living. He is no longer a man fighting for glory, but a force of nature, seeking his own end. But what does it truly mean for a demigod to desire death? Vengeance as conscious suicide, the seal of destiny. When Achilles returned to battle, was it for vengeance? Or was it a deliberate act of self-destruction, a final, desperate embrace of his own mortality? When Achilles returns to battle to avenge Patroclus, he does not do so with the hope of survival. The prophecy of Thetis is clear. Immediately after Hector, destiny is ready for you. By killing Hector, Achilles seals his own death sentence. This is not an act of blind heroism, but a conscious march towards the inevitable. His fury is not just vengeance. It is an act of self-destruction, a suicide assisted by the hand of destiny. He no longer fights to win the war, but to settle the score with unbearable pain, to find an honorable end that gives meaning to his loss. His physical invulnerability is irrelevant. His true vulnerability, his inability to live without Patroclus, drives him towards death with an almost sacred determination. But what is the true meaning of this choice? Is it redemption or pure despair?
The eternal paradox. Greatness in fragility. The most human hero. If the myth of the Achilles heel has blinded us, what profound truth about human greatness and vulnerability have we missed in the original sources? The myth of the Achilles heel has deprived us of the true greatness of this hero. It is not his invulnerability that makes him legendary, but his profound, heartbreaking humanity. His conscious choice to face death for glory and then to embrace it for grief makes him a character of unparalleled psychological complexity. Achilles is the eternal paradox, a demigod who chooses mortality, a warrior who finds his highest expression not in physical strength, but in the fragility of his soul. Every era has rewritten him, but only by returning to the primary sources can we rediscover the most brutal, vulnerable, and ultimately most human hero of all. And perhaps in this vulnerability, we find a reflection of our own condition.
Final question. If this immersion into the psychology of Achilles has shown you a different hero, a man who chose his destiny with an almost terrifying awareness, subscribe to the Academy and join our quest for historical rigor and psychological depth. But the final question remains. Do you believe Achilles' choice was an act of heroism or despair? Leave your comment below and join the discussion. The truth is often more complex than the myth.
If this content pleased you, I invite you to like it. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next videos. Your support truly encourages me to keep creating content like this.